everybody. Welcome to our webinar for this week. We were going to be presenting the surrogacy process with SurrogateFirst. I would like to just introduce ourselves first. My name is Gestationalcarrier, and I am the surrogacy educator here at SurrogateFirst. I am a one-time surrogate, but I like to share my journey online. So I've been featured in multiple articles, podcasts, TV, on TV worldwide. So I'd love to teach people about surrogacy and just educating others. And I'm here with Ashley Mareka. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yep. Hi, I'm Ashley. I am a four-time surrogate. I'm also the intake director at SurrogateFirst. And so I oversee all of the education portion of surrogates and intended parents and the screening process. So we would love to get started with our webinar. Jasenia has been kind enough to put a webinar together so that we can help you learn the process.
Yes, and we are also going to be having a Q&A session at the end, so stay tuned if you guys have any questions for us. We do these webinars bi-weekly, so every 2 weeks we do a webinar, so make sure to see us for the next one. I just want to go over a few things before we get into our talking for today. So just a few things that we're going to be going over for the webinar. We're going to be talking about the application process, intake, matching, medical screening, psychological screening, IVF, embryo transfer, pregnancy, and postpartum, all the steps of the surrogacy process, just so you guys can learn more in depth about everything. So the first one is the application process. So Ashley, can you tell us a little bit more about the application process and what can other people expect?
Yeah, of course. So the first step I would definitely say is research, right? So research around, look at the process, get to understand it. And when you're reaching out to these agencies, ask them about the good, the bad, and the ugly. So first step in the process is looking at different agencies, deciding what's important to you. Do you want a large agency? Do you want a smaller boutique agency? Do you want something with an all-inclusive package or an itemized? Are you looking to work with a certain parent from a certain area? Do you have a specific like termination stance? You want to make sure that when you meet with these agencies, you understand what you're looking for so that you can be able to help that. So I'd say first step, let's get a list together of questions you can ask an agency. Things like how many, cases does a case manager handle? Is there a 24/7 line if there's an emergency? All of those different items. And if you want a list, we do have a list prepared. So definitely reach out to me and Jasenia and you can find out. Once you contacted them, they're normally going to have like an initial application. And that's where it's probably about a minute, 2 minutes long. It asks you the basic qualifications. And then if you pass that, you'll be able to then go into the full application. And the full application is a very long process.
Yeah.
You can save it at every step so that you don't have to complete it in one journey. I'd prepare like a dear parent letter to talk about you and what you're looking for and what you hope for with your journey, because that'll usually be part of the application process. Get to know who your OBGYNs were, their phone numbers, all of those items, because it's going to speed up the process when you're looking at your application. If you know what years you delivered, their weights, how far along you were, and then like the OB contacts and things like that. It'll definitely help your process of completing the application. Once that application is completed, during the process, you'll get a call from an intake coordinator who will talk to you, answer any questions, help you with the application. They'll set up like an intake interview with you. And once you completed that intake interview, you'll start your screening process. So that's things like background checks, drug panels, psychological evaluations, medical records are gathered and reviewed. And so that's the beginning part of the screening process. Do you have any questions about that side of the process?
No, I think it's really interesting because I always tell girls whenever I'm talking with them that your intake is super important. Whenever you schedule your intake meeting, make sure you have like an hour to sit down with no distractions because we truly want to get to know you better. I guess a lot of people would have questions about like, why do I have to have a home evaluation? Why do I have to have a background check? Like, I guess I feel like a lot of people ask those questions.
Yeah, I mean, so me personally, I would say, would you be comfortable with someone growing your baby if you don't know the type of living situation they're in, or if they have, felony convictions, or they've had like, different complications? When it comes to the background checks and financial checks, It's also about, is this person financially stable? We would never want someone to just do this for money. That doesn't make it worth it. There's no amount of money that makes going through pregnancy IVF worth it, you know? And so we really want to know it's a heart factor. And so these all screenings are to protect the parents and to protect the surrogate, because sometimes, you know, as humans, we want to do something we want to do, and it's not always the best for us, or it's not always the safest for us and our family. And so sometimes an agency has to be that bad guy that's like, hey, I think at this time it's not right, or hey, we got to work on a couple things to be qualified. But at the end of the day, Surrogate First is 100% about keeping the surrogate safe, the baby safe, and the parent safe.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, they feel like, oh, it's like an invasion, but we really are, we're not trying to be snoopy. We're just trying to make sure that you're in a safe environment. You have lights on, you have water, you have nice beds, and just so we know that the baby's going to be all right, you're going to be all right during the whole process. So
Yeah.
after that, I know we start gathering all the medical records. How long does that typically take for a regular person?
Yeah. So that's the longest part of this process in the screening, is the medical record gathering. So there's a couple things that I always recommend with this process. One, when you're thinking about being a surrogate, book a future appointment for your PAP if you haven't had one in the last year. If you have your an IUD or an Nexplanon, something that's implanted for birth control, schedule that appointment to get it removed, because you're gonna need to have that removed in 2 periods before you can ever go to the medical screening with the clinic and your parents. So getting those things prepared is going to be that's what usually takes the longest time, is that part of it. With records, we can usually get records on average 2 to 4 weeks, as long as you give us the right information. So a
Right.
lot of times people are like, I don't know, I'm going to put this name. Well, we work for 2 weeks to try to get a hold of them, request, and all of those items. But then it comes back that you weren't even a patient there. It's also super important to be completely honest on your application, so that we know if there's anything that could require a specialist approval. So if you've had a cardiology thing, if you had heart palpitations during a pregnancy, it's not necessarily a disqualifier, but we're going to need to have a cardiology clearance. Do you
Right.
have TSH and thyroid issues? If you do, we're going to need to have that doctor write a clearance and make sure your levels are appropriate. So always be honest with that. Ideally, we like to say 4 weeks for the screening process, and then we'll order background checks, drug panels, and psych evals, and then we're starting to match.
Yes. And I think the matching is one of the best parts that everybody is waiting for. Like, I remember when I was matching, I couldn't wait to see the first profile. It was such a high anticipation. Um, how does that process work? A lot of people ask, do I get to choose the family that I'm a surrogate for? Yeah, so that's a big question that I get all the time.
You should. Now, here's the thing, not all agencies run the same, right? Some I've heard surrogates never even meet their parents till they're in the process. And so that can be really scary. Yeah, no, it's real. But for us, what we do is we look at what the surrogates requests are and preferences, what the parents request and preferences are. And then from there, we will share profiles. If the surrogate likes the profile, if the parents like the profile, if there's questions, we'll get those clarified. And if everyone likes each other's profiles, then we will send those records to the medical screening, to the clinic for medical record review. With that profile, we don't do just a pretty profile. We do about, for surrogates, it's going to be like 16 to 25 pages
Wow.
for your compensation, your request, what you're looking for, all of those to go to the parents. And then for the parents, it's probably about 10 to 12 pages that you get to read too. So it's very in depth, which helps you. And usually I've had about, I would say probably about a 99% success rate that if you guys like each other's profiles, you guys are going to match in the match meeting.
Right.
But once those records are approved by the clinic, and this is a pain, it can take 2 to 4 weeks. We follow what is the ASRM guidelines, where we don't actually have match meetings until the clinic approves the records.
I love
So
that.
once those records are approved, then you'll meet your parents in that match meeting. And the reason we do that is because we don't want anyone to, we want to protect everyone's hearts.
Yeah.
So if you fall in love with a profile, then you meet each other and you're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. But the clinic has particular requirements that may be stricter than ASRM. And so they deny a surrogate, then everyone is comparing the next family to that person, right? So the surrogate's going, these
Yeah.
aren't my first IPs. I don't like them. Or the IPs are going, oh, my first surrogate, no one can touch her. She was perfect, right? It was like love at first sight. So we want to protect everybody's hearts, and we want everyone to have an educated decision when they meet each other. And if they decide to move forward at that point, then that's where like the excitement of like actually going through the surrogacy process begins.
And I always like to tell people when you're meeting your intended family for the first time, your case manager will be there. So it's not like you're doing this all alone. They'll help guide the conversation, ask those important questions that you might be shy to ask when you're meeting somebody for the first time. If you have a partner, your partner will accompany you for this match meeting while you're meeting them. And sometimes, depending on what kind of family you're working with, you might have to schedule it for a certain time. If people are across the country, across the world, you never know where your intended parents might be from. So that's also something to think about. But I think matching is one of my favorite parts. I really love that Surrogate First reviews the medical records first with the clinic. I think that definitely saves a lot of heartache because a lot of agencies, they don't do that, unfortunately.
Yeah. And the majority, especially if you're a seeds member, right? They do follow those guidelines. And so that's kind of nice knowing that when you're working with an agency that is a seeds member, that they are following those guidelines. They are trying to do the most ethical surrogacy that there is possible. And those match meetings are exciting. So we always have someone on the meeting. So it will either be like an intended parent coordinator or a surrogate coordinator, but we send out a list of like questions to ask, what might be asked about you, like, and then we do guide it. So at our agency, we have a report that we do with the match meeting. We want to make sure everybody lines up and that we communicate and we all talk about all the different important matching points so that that can get saved. And then that can be shared with the attorneys when we're going through the legal process.
Yes.
And so it's about an hour long. Sometimes I've had them go a couple hours. Sometimes they're quick, like everybody's like, yep, no, I want to work with you. And like they get to know each other, we get the questions, and then they're on there for like 45 minutes, So it really just depends on the surrogate and the intended parents on how long they're wanting to meet. And it's just a beginning. But it is important to note that a lot of times once that meeting occurs, normally you won't start communicating on a regular basis with your parents until like after medical screening or after legal, because everyone's like, I don't know, are we going to become like, are we actually going to do this? Like, does this work? We want to make sure everyone's protected. No one feels like pressured to change their request or their preferences when it comes to legal. But the surrogate and the parents always have the right to decide when they want to communicate, whether it be at medical screening, legal, wherever they decide. We never want to hinder that with them.
Yes, for me, I definitely wanted to wait until after my medical screening just so I could like shelter my heart some more as well. Because I really wanted to make sure I was medical screened before I built this connection with the family. So I waited until my medical screenings and then really after legal for us to really connect, and then it was amazing. So after the matching process, then there's medical screening. So I know a little bit about medical screening. You go in, it depends depending on where the clinic is, you might have to catch a flight. For me, I had to fly to a different state for my medical screening. I was only there for like 1 or 2 days, so it might be different for every person. Every clinic is different. Um, some of the things we did at mine was a hydrosonogram. We did a lot of blood work, FDA labs. What are some other things that we might expect when going for a medical screening?
Yeah, definitely. What I would do is I'm just going to back up one quick second to that
Yeah.
middle ground between like you're in intake and then you're in case management, because that gets lost sometimes.
Yes.
You'll meet your case manager and then they'll help with the screening process. So they're going to help book those flights and help you understand what's going on. A lot of times you're going to get your FDA labs done. You could have a hysteroscopy, a hydrosonogram. I'm not a medical professional. I am butchering these words. Google them. It should show up. But there's quite a few things that can occur. Sometimes you have to do a psych eval with their clinic if they have a specific requirements. Sometimes your partner has to do like FDA labs and might be required to come. A lot of the times partners will do their FDA labs locally and they don't have to come.
Right.
And then we try to do same day medical screening. So if we can fly you in or drive you in and then go to the appointment and drive back or fly back so that you're not interrupting your work schedule or your children, we'll do that. But if you're flying for a couple hours, normally we'll fly you in the night before, you stay in a hotel, and then you go to the appointment, and then you head to the airport after that. Nice thing is that usually within a couple days to a week or two, you'll get your medical clearance. And once you get that medical clearance, you'll be able to go into legal. Now, a lot of people have too low of vitamin D or different deficiencies. If they were anemic in their pregnancies, they might be low and show anemia. And so we always recommend apply, start prenatals, start your
Right.
vitamin D, start your iron supplements if you need them. If you've had a history of TSH, you're going to want to get that done
Yeah.
prior to coming, to your medical screening. Check your levels, make sure, because the average woman, right? So normal range would be, like 0 to 4 or something like that, right? No more than 4 is the normal level for TSH. However, with IVF, they require you to be under a 2 because that gives the highest chances of success. So
Yeah.
a lot of women don't even know they have an issue because they test their, TSH, they're not on a medication, their doctors don't say they have an issue. So checking that out, that the prenatals, vitamin D and iron supplements will save you months in that medical screening process, because you're not going to get clearance unless those things are where they need to be. So once that occurs, once you get medical clearance, then you'll start legal.
Yes,
And
it's
legal,
definitely sorry, I was gonna say it's better being safe than sorry. It's
yes.
definitely safe. And the surrogacy process is already long. So I feel like if anybody wants to save that time, make sure you're on the vitamins.
That's what I'm saying. Like, and literally they're like $15 for like your supply of all of them at like Walmart. You don't have to get anything fancy. You don't have to spend hundreds. And if you're like, hey, I want this reimbursed, you can get it reimbursed by the parents. Save your receipts. Like, hey, I started these, 2 months ago because I want to make sure I was ready for medical screening. No one's going to be like, oh gosh, $30. Like, that's horrible to save us 3
Yeah,
months, of delay. So I
right.
would definitely say, get it all in there, make sure it's good. And they even recommend that, right? Like ACOG recommends being on prenatals months before you become pregnant, so your body has the sufficient nutrients it needs.
Yes. And then you were gonna get into legal. So legal care,
No, and legal's
legal
like,
age.
yeah, no, legal, I have a love-hate relationship with legal because you're so excited and you're like, I'm cleared. All we have to do is sign these contracts and then we get to get pregnant. But that's not how easy legal is. So
Right.
your agency will help you with like a list of attorneys that they recommend, who will be quick, efficient. You don't have to go with the list that the agency gives you. What the agency's list is it's not any type of kickbacks, right? So like, I don't refer a certain attorney and they give me a kickback. They
Right.
don't get, they don't give me a kickback. I don't give them kickbacks. And so it's really just about who have we worked with in those states that we know is reputable, that's trustworthy, that can complete the contracts, quickly and efficiently. And so I see a lot of times like surrogates and parents are like, I want to pick my own attorney, which is fine. But make sure when you're in this process that you definitely understand that they are like quad A certified, right? You want to make sure they understand surrogacy laws and state statutes. You can have an attorney, they might not know about surrogacy, they may just Google it, and then you get your contracts done, you get to pre-birth, and we'll get to that process. We get to
Right.
pre, and then find out that the courts won't accept your contract because it wasn't properly written to the state statutes. Now you
Right.
got to go back, rewrite that one, and then come back, and that's going to cost another $5,000-6,000, and it delays the process when all we're trying to do is get that pre-birth order, so that in hand filed with the court, so that if baby comes around 24 weeks or later, the age of viability, that the parents can go directly onto the birth certificate. I am losing my mind. So definitely understanding that the agency is here to help you. There's usually, if they're an ethical agency, there's no like undermining and sneakiness about who they're referring. But that's why you got to do your research about an agency.
Yes. And it's definitely important to have your own legal counsel.
Yeah.
Not sharing it with your intended parent, that is not ethical. Having your own legal counsel so you can feel protected because you're going into a contract. This contract is serious. Making
Yeah.
sure you understand it, asking questions. Even if you're on some surrogacy groups, looking up contract or looking up legal can definitely help out just by knowing those little things and looking out for that.
No, definitely. And it's about a 4 to 6 week process, right? So it takes about 1 to 2 weeks for the contract to be drafted. Then the intended parents read it with their attorneys, decide if there's any little changes. Then they send it back to your attorney. Your attorney reads it with you. You guys decide if there's any little changes. This is not the time and place to be changing your compensation and adding all different kinds of crazy things. If your attorney recommends like, hey, we might need to tighten this up to protect you. Yeah, that's it, right? But you did agree to a compensation. The parents agree to that compensation. And sometimes I can be like, I'm going to just be completely blunt.
Right.
Sometimes parents can feel trapped. They've already spent money on the agency, the attorneys, your medical screening, which can cost anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000, plus all the like reimbursements. And now they've paid the attorneys another like $5,000. And now they're feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm in like $30,000. And she wants to up something $5,000, $10,000. And so they're trapped. And like in surrogacy, parents already feel like a lot of their control is given up, right?
Yes.
And so for them, it's just one more thing that they can't carry their own child. They can't go through this process. They don't want to make anyone upset because they are so thankful for this woman who's going to be carrying their child. And so really important, make sure that your match meeting covers all of these things and that you both agreed to your compensation. Now, if you're not aware of what standard compensation is or what you feel would be right for you, research that when you're signing with an agency. Talk to an attorney. Hey, you're in my state. I'd love to be able to use you if I'm working, if I'm going to be becoming a surrogate. Would you mind looking over this? Is there anything I'm missing on here that I need to change? If you have any special requests, put them in. Legal is not the time to decide you want a $3,000 doula. Legal is also not the time for an intended parent to decide they don't want to agree to the comp that was already set up for the surrogate and what she's chosen. Like those all happen before that time. So it's important for intended parents and surrogates to make sure that they have an attorney who is wanting to protect them, but also understands the big picture that this is not about winning from one side or the other. It's about making sure all parties are protected and all parties have everything covered so that they can go through this process like they agreed upon.
Yes, I love that because I've heard of one story where a surrogate tried to change her comp at legal, and it just made me so sad for the intended parents. Um, it just broke my heart for them because they are spending so much money on this process. Surrogacy is not something people dream about from the day that they're born. This is something they have to do to become parents. So definitely do your research about the legal process before. My legal process was extremely easy, thank God. Just some minor changes. My intended parents were like, perfect, let's move on. And I was so excited to get to my embryo transfer and starting IVF, especially for being in the process for a few months. You're like, I can't wait to get pregnant. I
Yeah,
can't
you're like, get me pregnant now. Yeah.
wait.
Yeah.
Like,
And
no
it's
birth control.
And it's important to remember too that you have these attorneys who are there to represent you, to help you with knowledge, but sometimes they may change things in the contract because they feel it's better worded. So never to like assume as a parent or a surrogate that the changes were created because someone was trying to get a one up on you. It may just be the attorney saying, I prefer in this state that we write it this way, or we state it this way, or we pay it out this way, because we've seen this in the courts. I think a lot of times people are like, I don't even know the person I did a match meeting with because they put this in there or they added something or they changed it, only to find out that the attorney was the one who did that and recommended it. So always reach out to your attorney, find out, is this truly the intended parents, or to the intended parents, is this truly the surrogate, or was this something that was recommended by, by the attorneys? And then also if it gets to a point where you're like, I don't know what's going on, reach out to your agency, right? They have your compensation. They have the agency agreements. If someone tries to change the escrow balance of like what is supposed to be in there, reach out, find out what that is. And your agency should be giving you those documents too. You should have a copy of the compensation that you agreed upon, and even reevaluate it and check it before you start matching. That'll
Right.
help the legal process. And then we get to pregnancy. So maybe you can share about that.
Yes. So every clinic is different with their regimen, but you're going to be doing IVF for this pregnancy because you're carrying a baby that's not yours at the end of the day. So this looks like taking a bunch of different medications. The clinic protocol is different for every single clinic. I remember being on Lupron, progesterone, and oil, estrogen. There's a bunch of different medications you take during this time. Usually during your medical screening, if you're new to the whole process, they'll go over these medications with you. Ask you if sometimes like my doctor asked me if I had a preference, if I wanted to take the vaginal estrogen or if I wanted to do one needle every 3 days. I was just like, oh, perfect. I would do the needle just because I wouldn't have to remember it as often. So they'll usually teach you how to measure out your medications, when to expect to be taking them, like a whole calendar of your medication protocol. And you will get shipped all this medication, usually in a big box. I believe some of the medication does have to be refrigerated. So if you don't know, call your clinic immediately to find out which medication has to be refrigerated, what medication has to stay out. Because I can't tell you, I have seen in some of these groups people ruining their medication by leaving it at room temperature. And that's just another thing that intended parents like have to spend money on. So I was very meticulous about my
Opposite one.
what?
I'm the opposite. My
Yeah,
box came saying needed to be refrigerated and nothing needed to be refrigerated.
no.
So I'm like, oh my gosh, like, what do you mean refrigerated? I've never refrigerated, in the last 3 journeys. And it
Yes.
was just the box and how they boxed it from the pharmacy. And I was like, well,
I think
yeah,
one of my medications had to be in the refrigerator, and I was just like so nervous, like I gotta throw this in the fridge really quick. But
yeah,
I remember like, yeah, seeing in some groups some medication being ruined or left out. So definitely if you don't know, call your clinic or call the people who send the medication. And whenever you're running low, make sure to call them back to reorder new medication, because that's something I did not know
yeah.
about starting the process. Is I would have to reorder medication, and you have to do it in a very timely manner so you can get your medication on time.
That's
So,
why I use the app MetaSafe. Like MetaSafe is amazing. So MetaSafe is an app where you can put in all of your meds when they start, when they don't. It sends out an alarm. It's sorry.
it's okay.
I'll try to silence everything. They send out this alarm. And so it starts at like right at the time. Then it gets a little louder, like 2 minutes later, and then 5 minutes later, and then 10 minutes later, it's like all like nuclear
Awesome.
war. And it also notifies you when you're 5 days before needing to refill your meds. And so you put in the vials, you put in what it looks like. It keeps track of all of your times that you've done it. And then you're able to it'll tell you like reorder. And then so you already know. So you don't even have to think about it.
Yes. I love that. I didn't know about that app when I did my medication. I had everything written down, but I think the app sounds a lot more better because I remember one time I was running low on medication and I'm like, oh my goodness, thank God I realized so I can call in and make that order. It wasn't a problem, but it's just something that I didn't know about. I
Yeah.
didn't know you had to reorder medications. It's
Yeah.
something completely new to some of us, you know? So you'll have to take medications for 2 to 3 weeks. It just really depends on your body, how your body reacts to the medications. During this time, you'll go to ultrasounds, just to measure your lining and your uterus, getting blood work done as well to measure your levels, and then just to prepare you for transfer. Some clinics will give you a specific day, like this is your transfer day. And like my clinic was just like, okay, we're thinking around this time you'll be ready. And I'm like, okay, I'm just going with the flow.
Yeah. No, it's definitely, it's hit or miss. Like you don't know. And some clinics are going to go 0 hours of bed rest. Some are going to say 48 hours of bed rest. Some are going to have you there a day or two before to do a lining check or just to make sure you get there. And then you can go in and transfer in the morning and then go home. Some even clinics are going to do day of lining checks. And I've seen this where they'll do day of lining checks and they may need to adjust and say, hey, we got to give you an extra strength, to get a little thicker, and you'll come back in the afternoon for it. Some clinics also have to change your transfer time that day because maybe the embryo doesn't properly thaw and they've got to thaw a new one. Like it's a science, but it's not perfect, right? Like we have to be able to like ebb and flow with it and know like, okay, we got to trust these specialists, we got to trust these doctors, and we have to follow medical protocols. I think my surrogacies, I've had 4 successful transfers. I don't mess around with those meds. I get them all within 15 minutes of when they need to be done because I'm like, I ain't chancing that. I may have not had any problems with having my own children, but IVF is a whole nother creature. And so I think like taking it very seriously because to me, I value the embryo. I believe it's a baby. And so for me, it's like, I don't want to do anything to risk that embryo. And I don't want to do anything to risk that baby for those parents. And so we all know transfers aren't successful, right? And they're not 100% successful. And so like, I don't want to like be like, what ifs, if it's not successful, if it wasn't if it didn't stick, then I could at least say, well, I gave it my all and I followed everything I was supposed to do. And I did what I could, but the little guy couldn't stick,
Right, right. Yeah, because I always tell people like if a transfer is not successful, it's not your fault. A lot of us we try really hard and sometimes it just doesn't work out. Um, but when you come to your appointment, usually they want you to have a full bladder. You can actually see the embryo go in, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, it's like a shooting star.
Yeah, it's so cool and having the embryologist, your doctor in there, and then you're like, "Wow, I'm pregnant now," or
Yeah.
"I'm pregnant until proven otherwise." And I was very blessed to have my intended mother there with me for my
Right.
transfer, and I really love that. Um, but then in a few weeks, around 2 weeks after your embryo transfer, you'll be having a beta blood draw to see if you're officially pregnant or not.
Yeah. Yeah. So anywhere, right? Everyone talks about the horrible
Yeah.
2 week wait. Yeah,
Yes.
I'm losing it. It's getting later and later in the day. Um, but yeah, it can be anywhere from 7 days to 14 days they do it. Some even do it a couple days after just to even see if there's any HCG. So it really can vary. And I think that's what's important. We're talking about the process and we're talking average, right? What is the normal surrogacy process? But everywhere is different. Like, don't panic if you're like, oh my God, they didn't do it that way. Or they, like, it just depends on the clinic. It depends on the agency. It depends on the parents. And so know that like every journey has a basic standpoint, right? So we go through applications, through screening, we match, we go through medical screening, legal, we go through the transfer, pregnancy, closing of the escrow, postpartum. That's the process. But everywhere can be different and it doesn't make it wrong if yours looks a little different than everybody else's.
Right. I 100% agree. And I love that because, you were on bed rest. My doctor told me to walk around and I was just like, okay, I trust you. I trust my doctor, and we both had successful transfers.
We did. And
Yes.
that's the point. It's like, it's all science and theories, and they're trying to figure this out to be the best it can. And yeah, every doctor is different. Medical protocols are different. I had 6 weeks of medications before transfer. So people are like, oh my God, I had 2 weeks. Like, no, I started at ovulation the month before, went through a cycle and then and then transferred with that next ovulation. And so it was like, I think I started at period. Yeah.
Right.
Started at period, went through the first ovulation, went through the other period, and then like hit the ovulation again. And so
Wow.
definitely understand that. And my doctor stayed on it till 10 weeks, like 10 weeks after transfer. 8 weeks, 10 weeks gestation, right? So,
Yeah,
oh,
mine. Oh,
no,
sorry.
go. No,
I
no,
was
no,
gonna
no.
say mine ended at 13 weeks gestation, but I started only like 2 to 3 weeks of medication. But I was just like, when is this going to stop? I was
When
just
does
like,
my butt get a little bit better?
like, yes, like a few more days, and it was like I swear it was like 13 weeks. But
Yeah.
so
And
after you stop your medication, then you're going to get medically cleared to your OBGYN. So
you'll get IVF clearance. And so then you get to start with your OB and then you do a normal pregnancy. However, there's some extra testing when you're pregnant with a surrogate baby. It is technically considered high risk. So you may have to go see a high risk doctor, definitely for like the NIPT test, which is the non-invasive prenatal testing. They want to make sure that, it's kind of like the PG testing, the pre-genetic testing that you do prior with the embryos. Then you do it again at like 10 to 12 weeks. Then you've got like the amniocentesis, 18 to 20 weeks. You're starting your pre-birth order if you're in a pre-birth order state at that point. That's super easy. Like your first contract, like 50 pages, right? And your second contract's like 6. You're like, I got this, right?
yeah.
And so you get it done. It gets filed with the courts. Everyone gets their documents. You're going to be meeting with your agency, your parents, your, everything like that, going through the process. And then you get to like the 3rd trimester where you start creating like your birth plan, and the hospital gets all of the documentation. You register, the social worker knows like it's a surrogacy case, everything is set. And then it's like baby watch, right?
Yes,
Um,
yes.
and most people think like, oh, you gave birth to the baby, surrogacy's done. It's not,
Right.
like there's a fourth trimester, there's a postpartum time period where your body needs to heal. There is, waiting till that 6-week checkup from your doctor to get clearance. Your hormones are rebalancing. You've got all these different things. Plus, you're sending in bills to the escrow, to the agency to get those all paid off. So like there's a lot going on in that third, or I call it the fourth trimester, right? Or like the postpartum time period. And part of that, we're talking about this process, and I think it's a good time to plug in what we're doing. But could you share a little bit about what we've noticed with that postpartum time period from the whole surrogacy, community for the most part, and what we want to do as me, you, and our agency is willing to kind of like help us out on this community thing that we've got going on?
Yes. So me and Ashley, we have realized there is a whole lack of support for surrogates in the fourth trimester or postpartum to having their surrogate baby. So we are making a surrogate program to support surrogates in this fourth trimester or the postpartum period. We're creating this program for your mind, your body, your soul, with mental health help, exercise routines, nutrition, whatever you need help with. This group is going to be customized to the women who truly need the support. You can be from any agency to be a
Yeah.
part of this group. And we're planning to have monthly calls with a mental health therapist to anybody who needs it. Because not everybody has the picture perfect journey. Not everybody is feeling themselves after having their surrogacy journey. I remember feeling this sadness kind of at the end of my journey that, wow, like I'm so happy that I helped a family have this miracle, but now I feel like my job is done. And it kind of felt like a very bittersweet feeling.
Yeah.
So we really wanted to create an environment for surrogates to feel supported, especially during this postpartum time.
Yeah. And so if you have questions about it, like if you're in that postpartum period and what do I do? And, even if it's questions about like, hey, I got medical bills, how do I handle that? Like, hey, turn it into your escrow, turn it into your agency. It's just a community of support. Our moderators, our admins are all experienced surrogates. They are not from our agency. Like there's me, you, and Chelsea, there's a couple, but the rest of them are community surrogates who have been through the process, who we've seen teach and educate, who are, and we just want this to be something open to everyone. I know for myself, I struggled with the end of that season. Like I had been a surrogate. That was me. I changed my lifestyle, my health, my wellness, everything was focused on growing this human and getting them back to their parents. And when it ended, it was just kind of like, man, I've been fired, but I
Yeah.
was fired. Like the job was done. Like
Yes.
my task, my mission was done. It's time for the parents to have their baby. So I think that I am just super excited about this. I want to build this community. I want us to feel close. I want support. I don't want this to be anything other than just pure love on like, hey, if you need someone to talk to, like who else is going to understand when you cry? Like I would
Right.
cry and be like, oh my God, are you sad the baby is gone? And I'd be like, no, I've got hormones and my hormones are there and I'm sad my friends left with their baby. Like I
Right.
don't want the baby. I wanted my friends, And so it's a crazy time and hormones are going. And at least another surrogate can be like, yeah, I've been there. Totally feel it. You're not weird. Like cry it
Right.
out. If it didn't work out, maybe the parents, like your relationship changed at the end. Like talk about it. So many people are like, oh, you signed up for this. Why are you complaining? You don't
Yeah.
know what it's like. And so you can just sit down, right? Like I would love to see
Immediately.
not behind the keyboard. But so it's like that's definitely what we want, is that camaraderie, no matter where you're at in your process of that postpartum, who you came from, if you're independent with an agency. It's just about us all loving on each other and making sure we have that support so that we can go back to like our mind, body, and soul being better than it was before we started the surrogacy.
Yes, I really love that. And I can't wait for the group to get all these
Yeah.
girls to join and to like,
Soon.
even
Soon.
if
I'm working on
even
it.
if we help, yeah, I was gonna say, even if we help like two people, I
Yeah.
am super excited for it. I want to share a few things about our agency
Yes.
before we close up
Oh,
for
I
today.
forgot. Yeah.
Yeah, it's okay.
Look, we told you the process. Good luck.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Oh, give me 1 second, little technical difficulties. There we go. So I just want to say a few things for why you should choose us if you're thinking about becoming a surrogate. We have a few great programs here at Surrogate First. First, we have like build your own compensation, where you're able to build your own compensation to see what fits best for you for your journey. We have the health and wellness program. This is also for your mind, body, and soul. And we're going to be incorporating the health and wellness program into our postpartum supportive program. So I'm so excited for that. We have only experienced GC coordinators. So everybody who works at Surrogate First has either been a surrogate or an intended parent. So you really get that personalized support. We also have our Surrogate Plus program. If you meet certain requirements, you can earn up to $15,000 in extra compensation. And we have a supportive community. We really just try to be there for everybody. We even have a big Surrogate First group as well, where we just help each other. And if you're interested in the next steps for surrogacy, you can sign up to get a free surrogate consultation. You can have a consultation with me, Ashley, anybody at our company. You fill out your little pre-screen, you can qualify and apply, and then you can use our surrogate compensation calculator. And we just want to say thank you for joining our webinar for this week. My name is Jasenia. You can reach me at jasenia@surrogatefirst.com or my phone number 470-907-9957.
And I'm Ashley. You can reach me for intended parent information, surrogate information, whatever you need, any help. I am a researcher. I love data. So definitely reach out if you have any questions. Ashley@surrogatefirst.com, spelled the plain old Janeway, ASHLEY. And then you can reach me at 1-833-99-BLESS. I am the main line, and I'm also the emergency line, and I don't ever stop. So if you got questions, just reach out.
Yes. And thank you guys so much for meeting with us today. We're going to be doing another webinar in 2 weeks where we're going to be doing Meet the Surrogates of Surrogate First.
On our cruise.
Yes, on our annual surrogacy retreat. So this is our first
ever.
Our
First ever,
ever.
Jasenia, we're going to be reunited.
Yes. And basically, if you are a surrogate with Surrogate First and you completed a journey, you get to go on this all expense paid surrogacy retreat. We're taking the girls on a 4-day cruise. We're so excited to bond and have an experience of a lifetime. I'm so ready to make memories.
And in all transparency, this program started a little late in last year. So not all of our surrogates have been able to qualify this year, but we're trying to get everybody into the cruise. As you can imagine, it's quite expensive. So we're like working on it, but we're trying to get it. We're going to grow it. We wanted to start small with the first experience, and then we're going to open it up. So if you're a surrogate with us currently, pregnant, or recently have delivered, or you're about to deliver, you will get your invitation for next year. You also will have 2 years to be able to use it. If you're a surrogate with us and you were from the past and you're doing another journey, you still qualify, you're still able to come. Like, we want to get all of our surrogates there. Just give us a little grace with this first one. We want to work out the bugs before we're like, oh, 200 surrogates on a cruise, so fun.
Yes.
But it's coming. Like, it's coming. I'm gonna get it. I'm so excited.
Can't wait to share all of everything.
We love you guys.
Yes, we'll see you. Bye.